HACCP ServSafe exam. A food handler drops the end of a hose into a mop bucket. What has been created? Cross connection. How long can ready-to-eat TCS food that was prepped in-house be stored if it was held at 41°F or lower? 7 days. When should hand antiseptics be used? After washing hands. Which agency enforces food safety in a restaurant? State or local authority. What is an important measure for preventing foodborne illness? Controlling time and temperature. The 3 basic rules of an integrated pest management program are: work with a PCO, deny pests access, and deny pests food and shelter. What device can be used to record time temperature abuse during the delivery of food? Time temperature indicator. What information should be on dishwashing machines? Chemical concentration, water temperature, water pressure. How far above the floor should food be stored? 6 inches. Raw chicken breasts are left out at room temperature on a prep table. What is the main risk that could cause a foodborne illness? Time temperature abuse. How should cartons of coleslaw be checked for the correct receiving temperature? Open a carton and insert a thermometer stem into the food. When storing food using the FIFO method, where should the food with the earliest use-by dates be stored? In front of food with later use-by dates. A food handler thaws several frozen turkeys on a prep table. What is the danger that poses to the food? Time temperature abuse. The manager's responsibility for staff food safety training is to make sure that staff have the knowledge and skills to keep food safe. How should flatware and utensils that have been cleaned and sanitized be stored? With handles facing up. Wheezing and shortness of breath are symptoms of what? Allergic reaction. Reviewing temperature logs and other records to make sure that the HACCP plan is working as intended is an example of which HACCP principle. Verification. When installing tabletop equipment on legs, the legs must be 4 inches. What should be done when throwing away chemicals? Follow label instructions and regulatory requirements. What is the minimum internal cooking temperature for ground beef? 155°F for 15 seconds. What is sanitizing? Reducing pathogens to safe levels. What is the first step in developing a HACCP plan? Conduct a hazard analysis. What is the minimum internal cooking temperature for stuffed pork chops? 165°F for 15 seconds. What should be done with food contact surfaces after pesticides have been applied? Washed, rinsed, sanitized. What smell may be a sign that cockroaches are present? Strong, oily. What must food handlers do to make sure sanitizing solution for use on food contact surfaces has been made correctly? Test the solution with a sanitizer kit. When is it acceptable to eat in an operation? When sitting in a break area. What must be included on the label of TCS food that was prepped in-house? Date that the food should be thrown out. What is the most important way to prevent a foodborne illness from bacteria? Control time and temperature. At what temperatures do most foodborne pathogens grow most quickly? Between 70°F and 125°F. A backup of raw sewage and significant lack of refrigeration can result in closure of the operation by the regulatory authority. What are the most common symptoms of a foodborne illness? Diarrhea, vomiting, fever, nausea, abdominal cramps, and jaundice. What are the most important food safety features to look for when selecting flooring, wall, and ceiling materials? Smooth and durable. What should be done with an item that has been recalled? Remove the item from inventory and place it in a secure location. What is the only completely reliable method for preventing backflow? Air gap. The temperature of a roast is checked to see if it has met its critical limit of 145°F for 4 minutes. This is an example of which HACCP principle. Monitoring. If pesticides are stored in the operation, where should they be kept? In a secure location, away from food and equipment. An operation can hold TCS food without temperature control. How many hours can it display hot TCS food without temperature control before the food must be sold, served, or thrown out? 4. If food contact surfaces are in constant use, how often must they be cleaned and sanitized? Every 4 hours. When should staff receive food safety training? When hired, and then periodically after that. A food handler can cool a stockpot of clam chowder by placing it into a sink of ice water. At what maximum internal temperature should cold TCS food be held? 41°F. Which pathogen can be controlled by washing hands and controlling flies inside and outside the operation? Shigella spp. A pot of stew doesn't meet its critical limit and is thrown out according to house policy. Throwing out the stew is an example of which HACCP principle. Corrective action. Who should apply pesticides? PCO. What is required for measuring the sanitizing rinse temperature in a high-temperature dishwashing machine? Maximum registering thermometer. A customer called an operation and told the manager about getting sick after eating there. The customer complained of vomiting and diarrhea a few hours after eating the raw oysters. What pathogen produced the illness? Norovirus. Which part of the plate should the food handler avoid touching when serving the customer? Top. A deli serves cold sandwiches in a self-service display. Which step in the flow of food would be a critical control point? Storage. What must food handlers do to food immediately after thawing it in the microwave oven? Cook it. At what minimum internal temperature should hot TCS food be held? 135°F. What should food handlers do to prevent food allergens from being transferred to food? Clean and sanitize utensils before use. Who is responsible for keeping food safe in an operation? Manager or operator. Shiga toxin-producing E. coli is commonly linked with what type of food? Raw ground beef. Milk can be received at 45 F under what condition? It is cooled to 41 F or lower in 4 hours. Parasites are commonly linked with what type of food? Seafood. A server cleans a dining table with a wiping cloth and then puts the wiping cloth in an apron pocket. What is the risk that could cause a foodborne illness? Poor cleaning and sanitizing. What is the maximum water temperature allowed when thawing food under running water? 70 F. An operation has a buildup of grease and condensation on the walls and ceiling. What is most likely the problem? The ventilation system isn't working. What should food handlers do after prepping food and before using the restroom? Take off their apron. Which area of the operation is required to be the brightest? Preparation. Frozen shrimp is rejected during receiving for having large ice crystals on the food and packaging. What is the problem that caused this? Time temperature abuse. New staff must be trained in good personal hygiene, preventing time temperature abuse and cross-contamination, and cleaning/sanitizing. First equals general food safety. What does an operation that wants to smoke food as a method of preservation need to have before processing food this way? Variants. Live shellfish must be received with what documentation? Cell stock identification tag. What is the minimum internal cooking temperature for eggs, meat, poultry, and seafood cooked in a microwave oven? 165 F. The 5 common mistakes that can lead to foodborne illness are: failing to cook food adequately, holding food at incorrect temperatures, using contaminated equipment, practicing poor personal hygiene, and purchasing food from unsafe sources. A person arrives at a restaurant claiming to be a health inspector. What should the manager ask for? Identification. What is the best method of checking the temperature of a delivery of fresh fish? Insert the thermometer probe into the thickest part of the fish. Which fat tom condition will a food service operation be most able to control? Time. What is the most important way to prevent a foodborne illness from viruses? Practice good personal hygiene. A customer had a reversal of hot and cold sensations after eating seafood. What most likely caused the illness? Toxin. What is the purpose of a food safety management system? Identify and control possible hazards throughout the flow of food. What is required when receiving fish that will be served raw or partially cooked? It must be correctly frozen before you receive it. A food handler has finished trimming raw chicken on a cutting board and needs it to prep vegetables. What must be done to the cutting board? It must be washed, rinsed, and sanitized. Eggs and peanuts are dangerous for people with which condition? Food allergies. Why are preschool-age children at a higher risk for foodborne illnesses? They have not built up a strong immune system. What is the correct temperature for receiving cold TCS food? 41 F. What organization creates national standards for food service equipment? NSF. A food handler will be wearing single-use gloves to chop lettuce for an hour. When must the food handler's hands be washed? Before starting the task. What temperature must TCS food be reheated to if it will be hot held? 165 F for 15 seconds. What can occur if prep tables are not cleaned and sanitized between uses? Cross-contamination. In what type of places are cockroaches typically found? Warm, moist, dark. Which pathogens are found in high numbers in an infected person's feces, are highly infections, and can cause severe illness? Hepatitis A, norovirus, Salmonella typhi, non-typhoidal Salmonella, Shigella spp, and E. coli. Signage posted at a handwashing station must include a reminder to staff to wash hands before returning to work. Cleaning the surfaces of some cans of tomato sauce so that they can be accepted is called reconditioning. A thermometer used to measure the temperature of food must be accurate to what temperature? +/2F. Which time of thermometer can read the temperature without touching the item's surface? Infrared. What is the problem with storing raw ground beef above prepped salads? Cross-contamination. What is the most important factor in choosing a food supplier? It has been inspected and complies with local, state, and federal laws. What is the maximum distance that sneeze guards can be located from the self-service counter to protect food from contamination? 10 inches. What probe should be used to check the temperature of a large stockpot of chili? Immersion probe. What is the first task in training a large group of servers to prevent contamination of food? Assess the training needs of the servers on this topic. What is the proper way to clean/sanitize a prep table? Remove food from the surface, wash, rinse, sanitize, air dry. How far must a bimetallic stem thermometer be inserted into food to give an accurate reading? Up to the dimple of the thermometer stem. What is the minimum internal cooking temperature for eggs that will be hot held for service? 155 F for 15 seconds.